On the 15th of June 2026, inside a stadium in Atlanta, Georgia, a 40-year-old man stood alone in front of a goal and faced the defending European champions, Spain, one of the greatest football nations on the planet, a team stacked with the most exciting young talent in the sport. And this man, this goalkeeper nobody outside of Africa had ever heard of, stopped every single thing they threw at him. 27 shots over 90 minutes. 7 direct saves, 0 goals, and when the final whistle blew, he collapsed to his knees and cried in a way that had nothing to do with football. Because the people he wanted to share this moment with most were already gone. This is the story of Vozinha, and once you know where he came from, what he gave up, and what he was carrying into that stadium, you will understand why the entire world stopped to watch a goalkeeper cry. The island of São Vicente sits in the Atlantic Ocean, 373 miles off the west coast of Africa. It belongs to Cape Verde, a nation of just over 500,000 people. Small fishing boats, warm dust, children playing football in the streets the way children everywhere play football when there is nothing else, and that is completely enough. This is where Josimar Josvora Dias was born on the 3rd of June 1986. His father was in military service when he arrived. His mother had to work whatever work was available. So from his earliest days, Josimar was raised not by his parents but by his grandparents. They were his world, his reference point, the people whose voices he heard first and whose faces he looked for when anything important happened. His grandmother gave him a nickname that stuck so completely it eventually replaced his real name entirely. She called him Vozinha. Little Granny. It started as a gentle tease because he would run home to complain whenever the older boys knocked him around during street games. The name followed him across every country he would ever live in, and eventually the entire world would know it. His father had been mesmerized by the 1986 World Cup in Mexico and wanted to name his newborn son Valdano, after the Argentine striker Jorge Valdano, who scored goals alongside Diego Maradona during Argentina's championship run. But a registry official in Cape Verde at the time had a rule against foreign names on birth certificates. The request was refused, so the family looked at another player who was dazzling the world at that same tournament. A Brazilian fullback named Josimar, whose spectacular goals against Northern Ireland and Poland made him one of the stars of Mexico 1986. That is how the future hero of Cape Verde's World Cup debut got his name. Named after a Brazilian World Cup moment, nicknamed by his grandmother, raised on an Atlantic island, dreaming of a career that had no obvious path forward. As a child, he was good. By his own account, he was the best goalkeeper on his island. But he was small, and in football trials, size matters more than coaches like to admit. He kept getting passed over. He kept watching other boys from São Vicente leave for opportunities in Portugal, following the old colonial connection between Cape Verde and Europe, and he kept being left behind. He did not quit. The reason he did not quit is something worth sitting with, because it would have been completely rational for him to quit. He was being rejected from trials for his height. He had no professional connections. He lived on a small island with no pathway to the big clubs. Every logical signal was pointing toward a different life, and he kept going anyway. Not because success was guaranteed, not because anyone told him it would work out. He kept going because he decided that the alternative was worse than the rejection. He turned professional at 25. That is the age when many footballers are already established, already earning serious wages, already building the career years that lead to big transfers. The same year, Vozinha finally made his professional debut for a local side called Batuque. Spain's Lamine Yamal was born. Yamal, the teenager who would become one of the most talked about players at the 2026 World Cup, was a newborn when Vozinha was starting at the bottom of professional football on an island most of the world could not find on a map. What followed was 19 years of a career that reads like a geography lesson. Angola, where he signed for Progresso and learned to adapt his game in a foreign country, with a foreign language in a foreign culture, carrying his grandmother's nickname on his shirt because another goalkeeper had already claimed his birth name. Moldova, where he played for Zimbruciinu in Eastern Europe and faced cold winters nothing like the Atlantic warmth he had grown up in. Portugal, where he played for Gil Vicente in the second tier and saved 5 penalties in 32 appearances. Cyprus, where he spent 5 years with AL Limassol and won the Cypriot Cup in 2019, the single trophy in his entire professional career. Slovakia, where he played for AS Tren until 2023. Back to Portugal for one final chapter with Chaves in the second division. In between all of it, representing Cape Verde internationally since 2012, accumulating over 80 caps for the national team, becoming the second highest appearances record holder in his country's football history. 1 trophy, 19 years, 6 countries, and not a single moment at a World Cup, because Cape Verde had never qualified for one. Then in October 2025, Cape Verde beat Eswatini 3 goals to nothing, and qualified for their first FIFA World Cup in history. A nation of 529,000 people, the third smallest country ever to reach the tournament. And standing between their goal and whatever the world was about to throw at them was a 40-year-old goalkeeper who had spent nearly 2 decades proving that persistence matters more than pedigree. The draw placed Cape Verde in Group H alongside Spain, Uruguay, and Saudi Arabia. Spain was ranked second in the world. Cape Verde was ranked 67th. On paper, this was not a match. On paper, this was a formality. Spain was expected to win comfortably in their tournament opener and move on. The football world had approximately zero discussion of what Vozinha might do. He faced 27 shots. He made 7 saves that directly stopped goals. He denied Pedri. He denied Ferran Torres. He stood in front of Lamine Yamal and Nico Williams, the 2 fastest and most creative attackers in the tournament, and refused to be beaten. For 90 minutes in Atlanta, he was not a 40-year-old journeyman from a tiny Atlantic island. He was the best goalkeeper on the planet. And when the final whistle confirmed a 0-0 draw, Cape Verde's first ever World Cup point, in Cape Verde's first ever World Cup match, he fell apart. Not in a dramatic televised way, in the way a person falls apart when they have been holding something together for a very long time, and the weight finally lifts. He said afterward that he cried for his grandparents, the man and woman who raised him, who called him Little Granny when he was small and angry and running home from the bigger boys, who were his first audience and his first belief, had both died in the years before this moment. His grandfather was gone, his grandmother of 2 years gone. He had won the most important football match of his life, and the 2 people he most wanted to tell were not reachable. He also cried because his mother was not in the stadium. The visa process for traveling to the United States had been too expensive and too complicated, and the family had not been able to get it done in time. She watched her son become the player of the match at the World Cup from somewhere else. Before the match, Vozinha had 45,000 followers on Instagram. By the time the stadium was emptying in Atlanta, he had crossed 1 million. Within days, the number was approaching 15 million. Paul Pogba posted about him. Football fans who had never heard of Cape Verde were searching for his career history. A goalkeeper who had spent 19 years playing in places the sports media never covered had become, overnight, one of the most recognizable faces in the world's most watched sporting event. Then, Cape Verde kept going. They drew with Saudi Arabia. They qualified for the knockout stage of their first ever World Cup as group runners-up. Vozinha kept a clean sheet again. The 40-year-old from São Vicente, who was too small for trials as a kid, who started professionally the year a current World Cup star was born, who spent 2 decades moving between 6 countries winning 1 cup that nobody outside Cyprus remembers, was now in the last 16 of the FIFA World Cup there. There is a version of this story that is only about football, about saves and clean sheets and tournament results. That version misses everything that actually matters. The real story is about what it looks like when someone decides that a dream is worth more than the evidence against it. Vozinha had decades of evidence against him. He had rejections and obscure clubs, and a career that never once suggested this ending was coming. And he kept showing up, not because the reward was guaranteed, not because anyone was watching, but because the alternative, a life where he stopped trying before finding out what he was capable of, was simply not something he could accept. His grandparents called him Little Granny because he complained when the game was hard. He spent 40 years turning that nickname into something else entirely. When the whole world finally saw Vozinha standing in that goal in Atlanta, refusing to let Spain score, what they were actually seeing was 40 years of a decision made over and over again in Angola and Moldova and Cyprus and Slovakia and Portugal, in languages he had to learn, in climates he had to adjust to, in front of crowds who had no idea who he was. The World Cup just happened to be the moment the decision finally got the audience it deserved.